It everywhere. This is a screenshot from the latest Jurassic World movie with a giant feathered Therizinosaurus, or this dinosaur, Pyroraptor. You can do a Google image search for feathered dinosaurs and they'll come back with thousands of images. Now you can even ask AI to generate a feathered dinosaur for you and it'll happily comply. This was a toy that someone I know found in a church's Sunday school classroom. Same bones, just posed differently. One pose makes it look like a dinosaur, the other pose makes it look like a bird. And the fossil evidence doesn't do much for us, doesn't help us very much with knowing how the animal was posed in life. It's hard to tell. So, what criteria can we use? Well, that doesn't look like a bird. Like there's claws? Look at those big claws. Go to the grocery store, pick up a chicken wing. On that first digit there, most likely, most of the time, it'll have a little claw. Well, you say that's not really a claw, it's just kind of a little nub, right? Well, how about this picture? This is an ostrich. Look at the size of those claws. We just don't see them very much because they're usually covered with feathers. Of the families of birds have members with wing claws. It looks like it has 3 fingers. Dinosaurs have fingers, but birds don't really have fingers, do they? So again, look at this ostrich photo. You can't see fingers. There's no skin wrapped around separate fingers, really. But if you look at the skeleton, you can see, oh, there's 3 digits there. Wing on the right there, you can see that blue bone. It's actually 4 bones all fused together in an adult bird. So most adult birds fuse together like this. Those 4 bones into something called the carpometacarpus. But that doesn't mean they're not birds. Well, modern birds, we don't find teeth. We do find, on some birds, a serrated beak, but that's a different structure. But if we look at fossil birds, there were numerous fossil birds found that did have teeth. There's 6 examples there of different species of fossil birds. Clearly, bird turns out is very important, and we're going to talk about that later. They're all branching structures. All right, you can see all of the 6 different types there. They all have a main quill or rachis, and then they all have some type of barbs coming off of them. So that's an important thing to remember. A feather is always a branching structure. Now we do find things called filaments on some dinosaur fossils. So this is a Sinosauropteryx. It's a compsognathid dinosaur. And you can see those fuzzy things along its neck, right? Those are called filaments, but they aren't branching structures. Most likely collagen fibers or something like that. We don't know for sure yet, but that's what a lot of scientists think. And so it doesn't look like feathers. So we've got this difference, right? Filaments, and we've got feathers, but evolutionists keep trying to use the word feather to include both ideas of the filament and the feather into one word. Because they're trying to tell a story, right? They're trying to tell a story of how feathers evolved. Feathers are the most complex integumentary structure in creation. They're amazing, very complex. And so they need to explain how feathers came from something else. So you can see stage 1 and 2 in this supposed feather evolution. Those are the filaments, right? And we do find those on some of these dinosaur families in the lower left there. And then stages 4 and 5, those are branching structures. They're feathers. They're just 2 different types of feathers that we find on birds today. Stage 3, they haven't found those yet. They're completely hypothetical. This was a diagram based on a diagram from National Geographic magazine, and you can see stage 3 is just a little question mark there. Maybe it happened around here. So it's very different, and you can see there's 2 different groups of animals. So if we look at a group of what they would call theropod dinosaurs, these non-avian dinosaurs, there's a subgroup inside of there called Maniraptora. And if we look at all of the fossils where we find real feathers, they're all found inside of this group. They're all found inside of Maniraptora group, but just filaments. We don't find feathers outside of that group. So let's jump into the 7 dramatic differences between dinosaurs and birds. They're not feathers that are randomly attached to the body or something like that, evolving, partially functional. These are fully formed wings. And have around their wings is something called patagia. And this soft tissue, the red and the blue you can see there, the red is the propatagia and the blue is the postpatagia. And it's a complex system of tendons, ligaments, and nerves that automatically fold the wing feathers when the wing closes. Every feather in the skin of a bird each has nerves, blood vessels, and muscles that attach to it. So there's a whole network system of the nervous system and the blood vessels and the muscles to control these feathers individually in some cases, and to be able to grow these feathers, to be able to release them, to be able to grow another one in its place. And it's a sensory system, so that when a bird is flying, kind of like if somebody touches the hairs on your arm or something like that, you can feel it, right? Birds have that with their feathers. Dinosaurs and birds have feathers on their wings. All right, difference number 2. Swivel wrist. See, there's the chicken with the swivel wrist, Sapiornis, which is an extinct bird, and Microraptor. They all have the same bone and this swivel wrist functionality. So they have the ability to kind of close their wing. Now, if you look at the dinosaur wrist there on Allosaurus, it's very different. It doesn't bend that way. And that's consistent across all the theropod dinosaurs that we see here that are not birds. Number 2 major difference is swivel wrist. And coracoid bones there. And there's our dromaeosaur, Microraptor. Same thing. It's a little bit slightly different shape, but it looks nothing like the dinosaur. It looks very avian, looks very bird-like. It's got a reinforced shoulder joint. Let's extend that out. You can see of the dinosaurs across the bottom, they all have those rounded coracoid bones that are just an extension of the scapula. Don't have that extra stability. And across the top, you can see there's some variation, but they've all got some more of an angle and more of an elongated coracoid bone. If you look at that ostrich on the far top right, you can see that the angle's not very sharp. Why would that be? Well, ostriches can't fly, right? So they don't need as much of that stability. So how did a dinosaur shoulder with a usual deltoid muscle that just helped raise the arm loop through a canal to create a completely different muscle structure? It even reversed the direction that it was pulling. So our third major difference is that stabilized shoulder. All right, one more wing difference. A bird, a European starling, and you can see the coracoid and the furcula bone, those 2 white bones, and then you can see the blue part, which is the range of motion of the humerus. Okay? You think it could flap? No. Deft shoulder is located high on the body. You can see the coracoid and the sternum there, and the glenoid is pointing out. It's got that wide range of motion. Sometimes it's a little bit easier to see even on the side view. You can see the Allosaurus there. All it can do, its arm is just pointed down and to the rear of the animal. First 4. Feathers, swivel wrist, stabilized shoulder, and that specialized shoulder joint. And have you ever looked at a bird and wondered why its knee bends backwards? Well, that's not actually its knee. The knee is up in the body, usually covered by feathers, kind of hidden. And that's because birds are knee walkers. Their femur, the first bone in their leg, stays relatively stable, and the rest of their leg moves underneath it. That's why they look so funny when they walk. But dinosaurs, they walked more like people. They're hip walkers, right? The whole leg swings when they walk. These extinct animals, these feathered maniraptors, they have something that's a little bit different from the pygostyle, but functionally it's very similar. And you can see the base of the tail is very flexible, but the end of the tail is stiff. And that adds to their flight ability. It's kind of a flight control that they can use. And the same thing with Microraptor here. It's got an unfused pygostyle, but there's still stiffening elements in it. The end of the tail is still stiff. As opposed to the dinosaurs, like the Allosaurus, it's got that big, thick tail that's flexible all the way down. And this is because it's a problem for evolution. If a dinosaur, even if it evolved wings somehow, magically, and tried to fly or tried to soar, it wouldn't work. It would fall out of the sky. Because its center of balance is too far backward. The center of balance needs to be really far forward for flying to even work. Short tail, That's another major difference between dinosaurs and birds. So what they use there, advanced forms, modifications that had already taken place. That's evolutionary language, and this is all through the research papers. There's some things that are good observational science, and there's a lot of stuff that's just storytelling. So here's a diagram of that, again, that muscle that provides that locomotion in a dinosaur. Birds, very different. They have a muscle that has a similar name, but it does the exact opposite. It anchors to the stable femur that's not moving, and it has the ability to help move the tail. So what do we find in these feathered maniraptors? Well, there's Microraptor. We don't find the big muscle attachment on the femur. We don't find big muscle attachments all down the tail. It just had, most likely, a small muscle there that provided some tail movement. So birds have, you can see the blue bone there, they have a pubic bone that points backwards toward the rear of the animal. Dinosaurs have, in that green bone there, a pubic bone that points forward. And if we look at these feathered maniraptors, we'd expect to find pubic bones that point backwards. Now this one's a little bit hard to tell. In some reconstructions, there's room for interpretation as far as what the exact angle was. And so some of these there's debates about, oh, what was the exact angle, and how far was it pointing backwards, or was it vertical? But overall, it's pretty consistent. The pubic bones in the dinosaurs point forward, the pubic bones in the feathered maniraptors, the birds, are vertical or pointing backwards. And this is a big problem for evolution too. Thin Maniraptor comes from the evolution of highly retroverted pubes, that's rear-facing pubic bones, which, as previously studied, have proposed is likely to have fundamentally altered the moment arms and by inference functions of several major locomotor muscles. What are they saying? Basically, the whole pelvis was re-engineered between dinosaurs and birds. They're completely different structures. Major differences between dinosaurs and birds. There's more. We've got a whole list of other things that we're going to be looking into and researching. A common misconception, and that is that we find dinosaurs like this, all together, articulated, beautifully fossilized. That doesn't happen very often. So let's talk about Utahraptor. The yellow bones are what they found for Utahraptor in the beginning. That's it. Here's the drawings of the bones from the actual original paper. But that doesn't stop them from creating a reconstruction in a museum like this. Deinonychus. Dr. Haynes has done a ton of research on Deinonychus, and she's talked about how these specimens were found 50 million years apart, 30 miles apart, 30 years between expeditions. There's all these different, and that's true of even just the skull bones that they found. They didn't find an articulated skull. They found a bone here, a bone there, a bone here, a bone there, none of them all together, and they put this skull together and said, I think it looks like this. Same thing with the rest of the body, or so of them. There's over 100 species in Maniraptor and in those families, but only 15 or so have actually been found with feathers. And one of the things that confuses us is how these animals are presented. Because if you look at them like that, they kind of look like dinosaurs, right? But if you strip away all the assumptions and just look at the bones and repose those bones based on the things that we talked about, with wings that can fold and legs that had that knee that was closer to the center of balance, and then you put the feathers back on, they look a lot like birds, don't they? The evolutionary worldview affects the interpretations and the images that represent these animals too. So when you see an image of an extinct animal, don't just take it at face value. You need to dig a little deeper sometimes and ask some questions about it.